All right, welcome everybody to Unquestionable with Calvin Smith. I'm happy to have you guys back again. And today I've gotten an awesome guest with you. I've got Mr. Larry Pahl, the director of the American Institute of Pyramid Research. So hello, Larry. How are you doing today?
Hello, nice to be with you. Thanks, Calvin.
Yeah, absolutely. I really appreciate you taking the time to talk to little old me. I've been really interested in your research over the past, I've only found you maybe a week or two ago. I found you. I commented on one of your things on Instagram and was like, whoa, this guy's got some really cool evidence and information. So I really need to get him on the show and talk to him about this kind of stuff. So thank you again. I really appreciate it.
Sure.
So could you tell me a little bit about the American Institute of Pyramid Research? Like, what exactly do you guys do? I understand it's a nonprofit organization. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's a nonprofit think tank and research institute, and we're chartered in Tennessee, and used to be chartered in Illinois when I lived in Illinois, and when I moved to Tennessee, I just rechartered it here. So I've been studying pyramids for decades, and especially focusing on Egypt and especially Giza. You know, I've been to obviously the other pyramids in Dashur, Saqqara, and all throughout Egypt, and I haven't really had the time, even though it's called the American Institute for Pyramid Research. I haven't been to a lot of the other pyramids around the world in places that they are. So the main focus has been on Egypt. But as I have opportunity, I study, you know, in books and online about other pyramids. But I've taken 8 expeditions to Egypt, so that's really where I put the focus.
That's amazing. So when was the last time you were in Egypt? Were you there recently?
Yeah, I just came back the end of April. We had the tour that I ran. I ran a tour from April, I think it was 20 or 9 through 18th. It was the 9th through the 18th, and then I stayed on for days ahead of time and days afterward to do individual research projects. And even while I was doing the tour, I was able to find time to do some research too, because there's always a little downtime on the tour.
Right. That's amazing. I'm always so jealous of people that have been to Egypt multiple times, let alone one time, because I've never been myself, and it's like my life dream to go there and actually like see the pyramids and the Sphinx in person. It's one day soon, hopefully. But so what got you into pyramids and stuff? Like, how long have you been kind of in this
Well,
realm?
I've been in it almost 4 decades, so I've been doing it since I was a young man, and now I'm an old man. So you know,
Fair enough.
but you know, I've got a tour scheduled for the end of October. So save up your pennies, Calvin, and come with me. You know,
I
I
know.
just was putting on the website today some I haven't done this too much, but you know, kind of hype marketing. I focus on research, and that's really where I am. But I did put various comments that tourists with me have made, and so you know, people. Yeah, because the magic is Egypt. I mean, I like to believe that I'm value added too, that with my knowledge and contacts and things that I can really add to the experience. But Egypt itself, you know, provides the magic. So
Yeah.
you know, there's a lot of positive comments from people because you know it's just there's nothing else like it.
Yeah, I mean it's a beautiful place, and I mean the people who aren't just baffled by the pyramids, it's like, how are you not? You know, it's just a gorgeous sight, and I mean there's so much mystery surrounding it. I mean I could talk about Egypt for hours, you know, and that's why I need to get you on here because you're the guy to talk to, I think. But so I've kind of been looking at some of like your YouTube videos, and a little bit about your on your Instagram page.
Yeah.
So what kind of like new research, like have you found anything recently that is new to you that's really compelling and that's really isn't accepted by modern academia?
Well, you know, anything I do is not going to be accepted by modern academia because I'm an independent research institute. Now, I have made presentations, unlike almost every other independent researcher. I've made 2 presentations at large Egyptological conferences, and that's because my submission was blind reviewed, and so they don't know whether they're reviewing something from a high school kid or a professor at Harvard.
Fair,
They accepted on the merits. So I was accepted on the merits. So in that sense, you know, I have rubbed shoulders with those big guys. But you know that class of people is you know they're trained PhDs, and it takes a lot of money and time
yeah.
to get a PhD. and you have to accept, a certain amount of parameters that I don't want to, hold myself to. I do have 3 advanced degrees. I've got one in political science, education, and theology. But especially for archaeology and Egyptology, I don't want to put the burdens on myself that they have to work under. Partly the way they do excavation, it's so tiring in the sense, so exhaustive. They sift through every layer of sand and identify these little objects, and I respect that as a conservative science.
Absolutely.
That's one way to gather truth. But I use theological, I use esoteric, don't even necessarily subject myself to the world of strict forensics. I go on intuition, hunch, the guidance of the Alpha and Omega, and those are things that an Egyptologist could never do. But although I have argued, I've got a YouTube video about that I made in Egypt about independent researchers and Egyptologists working together, sort of like the marketplace. Take the marketplace. I was from Chicago. The Chicago Board of Trade is one of the largest markets in the world. Futures contracts are traded there. Every commodity is traded there. And what is necessary for the market to go is you have to have speculators, and then those that are running conservative businesses. You're Nabisco. You want to keep the price of cornflakes the same. You want to keep the price of sugar the same.
Right.
You don't want your price at the store to be fluctuating. So you need the speculators, the people that buy and sell to make money. That they're not out to, make their product be a stable product. They're out to make money. The speculators create the market then that allows you to buy a futures contract where you can lock in a price. So those 2 players are necessary in the financial market to make it go. Well, in the market we're talking about now, research of ancient mysteries. You've got the conservative science of Egyptology and archaeology, but then you've got the independent thinkers like me, where we bring in the big ideas. And so I think that so we can do something that they can't do. These big ideas, that's not part of the forensics of the conservative type research that they do, but those things being out there can be accessed by them and help direct research and stuff. So and obviously for independent researchers who tend to be a maverick freelance bunch,
Yeah.
it's good to be grounded in what they have discovered, what forensic science has come up with.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I do think that there could be a better working relationship between the 2, but most independent researchers tend to take the attitude, the Egyptian authorities are hiding things. They know stuff that
Right.
they're not telling, and I just don't buy that. I know Dr. Mark Lehner, probably the most famous scientist at Giza. He's an honest man. He's doing real research. So, you got to find a different game than slamming the Egyptologists.
Okay.
Present what truth you have, but you don't need to slam them
Right.
to make your truth.
Agreed. So do you think that like Egyptologists, because I've heard a lot of hate around people like Dr. Zahi Hawass and stuff like that, of him rumored to be hiding things of like the Sphinx and the pyramid. So do you think that I guess they're being truthful and that they really are releasing all the information, or do you think that they're holding anything back at all?
Well, you asked me you asked me 2 different questions.
Right.
First of all, are they truthful? At the level at which they work, they're truthful. There is truth, but are they holding something back? They might be, just like I've got 3 or 4 research projects going right now that I haven't said a word about because, I want to, test myself. I want to go before I say, here's the discovery. And I think Egyptologists do it all the time. Like, for instance, Hawass didn't release any footage from, what the Jedi robots did, in the air shafts. Well,
Right.
he doesn't owe it to everybody to tell immediately anything he's learned. Anybody wants to sit, but usually what's meant is this. They don't put it in a positive spin like that. Well, of course, he's going over data. He doesn't want to just put something out there till he knows it.
Right.
They're sort of saying, oh, he really found the secret mummies, and he's not telling us. Or he really found the Hall of Records that Edgar Cayce talked about.
Yeah.
But he doesn't. I think, are you deluded? Do you really think that Mark Lehner and Zahi Hawass found the Hall of Records, but they said, shh, let's keep it quiet so all those guys don't say we told you so.
Fair enough.
I mean, I don't believe that for a moment. You know, they like to get famous for finding things. If they found the Hall of Records, they could get their name even higher. Mark Lehner
I
finds
agree.
Hall of Records underneath the paws of Sphinx. So the idea that they're hiding something that way, no. And as far as hiding evidence, you know, like that, I've heard uh, Dr. Lehner say it. He was back in his hometown in Minot, North Dakota, on a little TV show,
Mhm.
and you know, he was asked about Graham Hancock and John Anthony West and these guys. He said, look, you know, I hear their claims. They say that there's an ancient, you know, lost high-tech civilization. He says, well, there is. It's the one I'm finding. You know, he has dug in Giza for 40 years
Right.
and he hasn't found any spaceships there, you know, and really there's not evidence of a former Atlantis unless you use the kind of evidence that, oh, look at these drill holes, look at this curved granite. But what people don't realize, look at the YouTube channel Sacred Geometry Decoded.
Yep. Yep. I'm aware.
Egyptians could do those things. That's not evident. To show a drill hole, to show curved granite, to show highly polished and straightened sides is not evidence of Atlantis. It's evidence of the great craftsmanship that Egyptians were capable of. And I'm sorry, you know, you're just holding on to the party line and you haven't looked at what a granite worker skilled can do today
Mhm.
without high-tech tools.
Okay.
Just go to a master craftsman. I used to work with a stonemason trained in England, Henry Fowler.
Mhm.
What a stonemason can do that's trained. And think about in Egypt,
It's amazing.
there were no universities in Egypt. There was no
Yep.
formal university. There was no schools of engineering. Well, how did you learn? Just think of what you could learn though if your father and your grandfather and your great grandfather were all stonemasons and they taught you
Yeah.
every day and you learned. That's much greater than going to a college for 4 years. So you go to school of
Agree.
engineering for
I
3 or
agree.
4 years, learning from father to son. So that's the way they learned, and they gained a tremendous reservoir of capabilities to do remarkable things with stone. So if you're going to convince me that there's an ancient high-tech civilization that's missing other than the Egyptian one, show me where the shopping centers are. Where's the nuclear reactor? Where's the steel factory? Where's the phone banks? In other words, if they had a high-tech civilization, those are evidences of high-tech civilizations.
Right.
To tell me a drill hole and curved granite is evidence of ancient high technology, sorry, you're gonna have to do better than that.
Okay. So you don't necessarily believe that Graham Hancock or like Randall Carlson or Robert Bauval, anything of that nature. Do you think that they're kind of passing around the wrong message, more of a pseudoscientific
Well,
message?
here's the thing. Here's the thing. I absolutely believe that an Atlantis-like civilization existed. I'm not denying anything that they're saying.
Okay.
I'm just saying they didn't. There's no evidence that Giza was built by it.
Gotcha. Okay.
I believe Atlantis existed and it fell. That doesn't mean it built
Okay.
everything in the world.
Right.
Atlantis did
Right.
what it did, but it didn't build Giza. I mean,
Yeah.
sorry.
Yeah.
I do think that there were things going on in Giza before the pyramids were built. It's
Oh
been a
yeah.
holy site.
Definitely.
The
Definitely.
ancient legend says that Enoch, the prophet Enoch, was translated to heaven there because if you believe the Bible says he didn't die, he was translated to heaven.
Mhm.
And you know, the oral tradition says it was from Giza. So Giza, you know, has got an ancient history for being a holy site. That doesn't mean that the pyramids were built, you know, anciently. I mean, like before the flood or, you know,
Right.
10,000 years
Right.
ago. It just means they were built in a place that had a very holy history. And,
Okay.
you know, the archaeological evidence that says that Khufu, you know, built the Great Pyramid is much stronger than the alternative crowd allows. First of all, there's the debate about the graffiti in the relieving chambers, and what the people that get so strong about this fail to acknowledge is that Zahi Hawass took Robert Bauval, Graham Hancock, and John Anthony West up to the relieving chambers.
Mhm.
They saw the graffiti and every one of them said, that's real. I was alive at the time, you know, because I was in
Okay.
79 or something when that
Right.
happened. And I remember exactly what Bauval did, the way he humbled himself. the way it wasn't a complete humbling, but what he said was before that he was on record with Graham Hancock and saying that it was built in 10,000 BC, and they based that on the heavens, Leo, where Leo was, and where the Orion, where Orion was at that time, and so they said at 10,000 BC. So what they changed to was they said, okay, it wasn't built in 10,000 BC, it was designed in 10,000 BC.
Okay.
And that's what Bauval said at the time. Now, decades went on and but John Anthony West said, anybody that doesn't think that's real is crazy. John Anthony West made some very strong statements. Ancient Architects has quoted both Graham Hancock and John Anthony West. So let's just take that one piece of evidence.
Sure.
If even those guys, the leading trinity of the alternative movement, Bauval, Hancock, and West, if they're saying that graffiti is real, that means that Khufu's workmen in Aswan, 500 miles away, etched in the red ochre paint that's still used today. And the red ochre paint, I made this block and it's the 17th year of Khufu.
Right.
And that Scott Crichton book, the evidence that they try and say, first, the idea that that was all forged by Howard Weiss, my goodness. Weiss, okay, if you've seen what Michelangelo did on his back for 3 years painting the Sistine Chapel, you would have had to have skills like that. That graffiti is upside down. Yep. How do you get scaffolding up in there? It's hard enough to squeeze your body through there. So how do you get upside down? Also, the forms of Khufu that were used were not known by Egyptologists at that time. Now that's a fact. So Weiss couldn't have forged something he didn't even know, because no Egyptologist would know what to forge, because the Egyptologists didn't know several of the forms of the name Khufu. There's 5 basic nomens or forms for the title, and then 2 cartouche types.
Yeah.
So that is evidence number one. That you just can't be overcome. That's evidence that Khufu built the Great Pyramid.
Okay.
Another one is, and this is equally as powerful, the Queen's Chamber air shaft.
Yes.
Wasn't opened until 1872 by Wayman Dixon. There was a shipbuilder, I forgot his name, that suggested that they look in the Queen's Chamber in the same approximate place as the air shafts, which were plainly visible in the King's Chamber. And so they did that. He tapped around. And so he went in about 8 inches in. They found there's air shafts in the Queen's Chamber. That was the first time they had been discovered since they were put in.
Yeah.
So that means anything in there, they didn't have robots, Jedi robots, Gattenbring type robots back then. So anything that was in there was in there. Well, one of the things that was in there was the wood. And if you follow the torturous story of where that wood went from the time Dixon opened it, then he sent some of the artifacts back to England and to Scotland for C. Piazzi Smith to look at, the Astronomer Royal from Scotland, and how they were sent back and forth. And then the wood was misplaced in the Egyptian Museum, and it was just found at the University of Edinburgh by an Egyptian woman who happened to be working there. She was in the Far East section. She knew this was Egyptian. It shouldn't be in the Far East section. And she recognized this is the wood from Wayman Dixon and it was just carbon dated.
Oh, really?
Now, carbon dating is something that always the, ancient alternative crowd wants to use. Okay, so the carbon dating puts it at about the time of Khufu. Some of the carbon dating was maybe 200 years older, but when you take the old wood problem, just study the old wood problem, it could have come from a cedar of Lebanon that was very old and was only used recently. And plus a very big tree, the inward part of the tree dates differently than the outer part of the tree. So a 200-year difference is nothing in carbon dating. So that's a second very powerful archaeological evidence that the Great Pyramid was built at the time of Khufu. And if you say, well, he redid, there was something there before him and he just put a little trimming on the top. Well, they were at least up to the Queen's Chamber
right
at that time.
Exactly.
So if you can build up to if you built everything that's on the Great Pyramid above the Queen's chamber, including the Queen's chamber. And let's face it, that shaft, then you're pretty amazing. I
Yeah,
mean, you
definitely.
might as well have been the original Atlantis.
Right,
If you're
right. You
saying
might as
that's so
well.
amazing, the ancient Egyptians couldn't have done it. It's so amazing. Well, guess what? If you say that they built on top of what everything below the Queen's chamber was built before them, that's nothing. What's below the Queen's chamber is nothing. It's what's above it that's amazing. So the
Yeah.
Egyptians did the amazing thing. So two powerful archaeological evidence. It's also a lot of people don't know that when the casing stones were finally uncovered, because C. Piazzi Smith, who the astronomer royal for Scotland, who gave his life to studying the Great Pyramid in many ways, at a certain point, he couldn't get the exact dimensions of the base because the pyramid was covered with rubble, as it was for centuries, for thousands of years. When it was finally cleared away, they found a bunch of Khufu cartouches hidden away behind that no one could have snuck in there and forged. So there's three powerful archaeological evidences that the Great Pyramid was built by Khufu. So get over, take ancient architects. Matt Simpson's a great researcher, a great YouTube channel. He was always an alternative guy, and he kept studying, and he did this, YouTube video recently where he said 10 reasons why Khufu built the Great Pyramid. And I think he lost a couple hundred, well, not a couple hundred, but he lost, I know, tens of thousands of followers when he said that.
Oh man.
Well, he had almost 400,000 at one point, but I know people didn't like that. But he just is, was found. I told him a long time ago. I taught Matt a long time ago. I told him, I said, you're gonna come to see that Khufu built the Great Pyramid, and he has.
Interesting.
So,
okay.
To me, that argument's over.
For sure. I mean, I've seen, so something else interesting, you kind of touched on it a little bit earlier, is the Orion Correlation Theory. I'm not super familiar with it because I just kind of started looking a little bit into it. And from what I've read, it's really compelling and interesting. Can you, for someone like me who isn't necessarily an expert, can you kind of give like a layman's kind of explanation of exactly what?
So I wrote a book extending the Orion Correlation Theory. It's called ENOCH, the Egyptian New Orion Connection Hypothesis. So instead of saying the Orion Correlation Theory, I've got the Orion Connection Hypothesis.
Interesting.
But here's why I earn the name and Bauval doesn't. Robert Bauval came up with the Orion Correlation Theory, and it's brilliant. I'm not knocking Robert Bauval. Listen to what I am saying, though. He fought hard. He was trying to get acceptance, in the Egyptological crowd and the astronomy crowd. And I used to think, back when he was first coming out and promoting his books, I thought, what in the heck Bauval, are you so concerned about getting the approval of these guys that are never going to approve you? You're an engineer, so he's a qualified person, but he's not an Egyptologist, not an astronomer. And so he's fighting hard to get this accepted in the mainstream. I thought, why do you need to get it accepted in the mainstream? You got millions of people buying your books worldwide. People see it. You don't have to wait for the Egyptians. But the thing that I had to say about Bauval, he never extended it beyond the 3 belt stars. So the Orion Correlation Theory is this. You want a simple explanation? Here it is. The Egyptians said, as above, so below. All right. So there's the constellation Orion in the sky. Let's put it on the ground here. So there's Orion's belt. Oh, the 3 Giza pyramids are his belt. There's a correlation between the sky and the earth, as above, so below. Okay, so that's the Orion Correlation Theory. Let's correlate the stars with the pyramids. So you've got 3 stars and you got 3 pyramids. Okay, great start, Robert Bauval. But who is known by their belt? Calvin, you can't see my belt right now, and I can't see yours.
Right.
So after we have this, podcast, I go up and I talk to my wife. She's going to say, well, what's Calvin like? I said, well, he's got a great belt. Well, what's his personality? I don't know. He's got a great belt. Well, he's a muscular. Well, he's got a great belt. Well, what are his intellectual thoughts? Well, he's got a great belt. You can't say you've got the Orion Correlation Theory if all you have is 3 stars and the belt. So what I did is I went to every place on Egyptian soil where the major stars in the constellation Orion fall on planet Earth in Egypt.
Amazing.
That's the Orion Correlation Theory. And I've said this many times, and maybe your podcaster, I think I'm the only person in the world who's done it. Now, I'm not boasting. I'm not boasting. I'm just being honest. I think if there's somebody else, I want to talk to you. I want to meet you. I want to correspond with you. I'm all alone in this corner saying I alone have done it. And
Yeah,
I've said that many times because I'm saying it to be provocative. So somebody says, hey, no, I know a guy who did it. And no one has come at me and said that.
very interesting.
Bauval, I think, tried to in the beginning, and I know why he didn't, find it. Because if you take the three pyramids in Giza, they do correlate with the belt stars, if that's all you look
Yeah,
at. But if you extrapolate from those three stars, in other words, take the astronomical units, how far apart are those stars in the sky? Okay, then use that scale to go to Betelgeuse, the shoulder, Bellatrix, the other shoulder, Rigel, the foot, Mysa, the head, and you'll come down and you won't have anything. If you use the scale of the spacing of the pyramids to correspond with the spacing of the stars, then from that you could lay out the entire constellation of Orion on Egyptian soil.
interesting.
Well, if you did, it doesn't score. So what Bauval didn't realize, as I did, that the belt part wasn't to scale. The rest of for Orion to be laid out on Egyptian soil the way that I did, it's the way the Egyptians laid it out, but they didn't use the belt as the scalar representative in a sense. So
Yeah,
if you, and so Bauval never, because I think Bauval spent some early years trying to find it. He would have liked to stop and think about it. You're the guy that's got the name Orion Correlation Theory, but all you have is the belt.
yeah,
Robert Grant,
fair.
who's a
Yeah,
big sensation on Instagram, Robert Grant wrote the introduction, or the foreword, I should say, to my new edition of this, which I hope to get out this year. But he said in there the same. He said in his foreword, he thought the same thing when he first heard about the Orion Correlation Theory from Bauval. Well, what about the rest of
yeah,
the stars in the constellation Orion?
right.
And so he said that that my book's an important book for everybody in the world.
Definitely. I'm definitely
And,
gonna
and
have to
here
pick it up for sure.
and here's why. Because the conclusions I came to, I'm an honest researcher, and I try and let the evidence lead to the conclusions.
Definitely.
So when I went into this study, and I was nervous and I had doubts, I had to work through some things to realize how to lay out Orion on the Egyptian soil. And do I need to know spherical geometry? Who am I? I'm not an engineer. And I worked through all that to feel very confident now about what I found. And so if you're just going out to prove what you already know, I'm going out to prove that Khufu didn't build the Great Pyramid. And if you do that, that's not the kind of research I do. My research is I studied the evidence and try and let it lead the way. And that's what happened here. And the conclusions I came to in this book, I did not have in my head beforehand, not a
Right.
way in the world. What I thought about when I wrote this book was, for every star, I'm going to find a pyramid. That astroarchaeological intent was my whole intent, that as above, so below, star, pyramid, star,
Definitely.
pyramid. That's what I started with. That's not where I ended.
Yeah. I mean,
So,
that's
you know
amazing.
what? I've got to run out and get something right now. Can we
Yeah.
pause for 5 minutes? Is that
Yeah. Yeah,
sounds
absolutely. That's totally all right.
okay?
We can totally do that.
Okay. Okay. I'll be right back.
All right.
All right.
Awesome. Yeah, that's really compelling. So my next question would be, what would be the point of them correlating Orion with the Giza Plateau, and what would be the point? Why would they be so interested in Orion specifically?
Well, there's two questions there. The first one, because of the Egyptian maxim, as above, so below. So that would be the reason. But the second question is, why Orion? And now, and I've done several YouTube videos about this. Um, that putting the focus on Orion takes the focus off of Egypt, which is good, because Egypt is just one of the ancient societies that was interested in Orion. A bunch of ancient societies were interested in the constellation Orion. So the question would be, why? Why this near universal fascination among ancient cultures
Mhm.
for the constellation Orion. And I think, I think the answer is relatively obvious. There is a fascination with the ancient cultures because they experienced the type of disasters that led to the collapse of Atlantis. They
Right.
were aware of pole shifts or major catastrophes. And it's said that Enoch, the two pillars he was going to build, and I think the Great Pyramid is ultimately one of the manifestations of the pillar of Enoch, but would include all the science of the ancient world. And so, more and more we're finding, I just did a YouTube video yesterday or the day before about how the speed of light is in the Great Pyramid. And it's there 3 different ways.
Mhm.
So I thought the speed of light was like, 1905,
Yeah.
Einstein, or whatever,
Right.
E equals MC squared, like that's a recent finding, right?
Yeah.
No, and so the ancients, Enoch said that he wanted to both encode the science, the math, the geometry of the ancient times, but also warn about catastrophes to come. So Orion is this, this judge basically, because he's got this club raised and he's about to strike. So
Yeah.
there's a symbol of these catastrophes, the Great Pyramid, that the Pillar of
Yeah.
Enoch is supposed to be warning about. And I've done
Right.
a couple of programs about the pole shift that seems to be predicted by the 4 tetragrammaton, the 4 ancient letters that are at the very entrance of the Great Pyramid, little known. But I've done that, and I do think that the Great Pyramid encodes in other ways these warnings. Some people have done some work on how Giza is a massive clock because of the precession of the equinoxes, and you can tell kind of where we are in time. And
Yeah.
there, Gary Osborne is one that's said that that seems to be predicting, a future catastrophe. So
Interesting.
that would be the fascination. And so the Egyptians, because the Hopi Indians in Arizona, they brought Orion down. Almost all their settlements are at major stars, even more so than in Egypt. And as a matter of fact, that this shows one of the things that began giving me confidence for my finding of Orion on Egyptian soil is that the one in Arizona is much bigger. In other words, you can represent Orion any way you want to. I can draw a picture of Orion on this book. So
Yeah.
I've represented the heavens in this picture right here.
Yeah.
But I could make it bigger. I could take up a whole page. So that's bigger than this. So guess what? I could fill this whole back wall. And so the Hopi Indians brought down Orion onto a much larger scale
Wow.
than it's brought down in Giza. So there's not, so that was one of the things that gave me confidence. I was realizing, well, I don't have to be an expert in spheroid geometry or
Yeah.
I just have to find what the Egyptians did. It's plain by what they did, by
Yeah.
what they left there, the same as the Hopi Indians made it plain the way they were. And so you could say, well, how did they do that? I don't know how they did it, but one way you could do it would be take a picture, a transparent picture of where the stars are. Like take a transparent piece of paper and then just lay that down onto the soil. Oh, but
Yeah.
you could expand it, just scale it out. So
Right.
pull it 6 miles, pull it 10 miles. So that's all that's being done. That the heavens are basically being brought to the earth different ways by different civilizations.
That's
And
amazing.
so it's just because there's a lot of focus on Egypt and the mysteries that are there, that gives a special importance, I think, to the Orion correlation theory in Egypt. But there's a lot of correlations with the constellation Orion, China, Mexico, you know, Arizona. It's
Yeah.
not just Egypt.
Yeah. Man, I was just in Arizona like a year ago too, and where at in Arizona is that that
Well,
site?
it's all over. It
It's all
takes up
over.
almost the whole state. I mean, when you look at
Wow.
how, just look at where the Hopi civilizations are. Who's done Gary? It's not Gary Osborne, but Gary. Drawing blank in his last name, but he's done a lot of the work on that. So you just do a Google search for
Yeah.
Orion correlation, Hopi Indians, Arizona, whatever. You'll find it.
It's very interesting. Man, I wish I would have known about that a little earlier. Otherwise, that way I could have
Yeah,
went and did a little bit of work on it.
I think. Did you go to Canyon de Chelly when you were there?
No, we flew to Phoenix and we hung out in Phoenix. We saw oh, I don't know, not really anything of any significance, just a lot of, around town. I tried to kind of look up some like museums and stuff like that in the area.
Canyon de Chelly is one of the Hopi settlements, because I was there. I flew into Phoenix too, and it's it's the famous canyon. It's like the Grand Canyon on a smaller scale,
Yeah,
and it's an example of one of the Hopi settlements. So,
very cool. Yeah, it's very interesting because we plan on going back again sometime. So definitely, I'll have to remember that next time I go there for sure. Something that I just saw on your Instagram today is something. It's you. I believe you said that you discovered this Alpha Omega symbol in the pyramid.
Yeah.
So what exactly is the Alpha Omega symbol, and why would that matter in the pyramid?
Well, let me see here. Why don't I share the screen on that?
Sure, go ahead.
Okay, so okay, so let's look at one of these right here. Okay, so can you see that?
I can.
You can?
Yep.
Okay, so that's the Alpha and Omega that I found. Now, if you looked at today's posting on Instagram, I said it's more than an Alpha and Omega, but there is an Alpha and Omega there. You can see that plainly the Alpha, and then the O, rises above it, and it does seem to have serifs at the bottom like the Omega. But but there's also an inverted V there, which is not really part of an Alpha and Omega. But I call it an Alpha and Omega because I do think it is, because my friend Robert Grant, whose birthday it is today, I wrote him a birthday poem and put
I
it on
saw
his,
that. Yep.
yeah. So yeah, I had fun doing that. And so he discovered an Alpha and Omega on the sarcophagus rim in the King's Chamber, and it's plainly there. There's we've had photographs of it, and so it's plainly there. And I found an Alpha and Omega on the outside of the Great Pyramid. And Robert Grant agreed with me when I showed it to him when I discovered it a couple of years ago.
Okay.
So that's one reason I called this an Alpha and Omega. This is in a different part of the pyramid. The King's Chamber, where he found his Alpha and Omega, that is, the public can get in there. Anybody could go up there that pays the entry fee. But you can't, not anybody can get to where I found this in the pyramid. I had special permission, to be there. So that's hard to, go through the paperwork and do that and pay the money and everything.
Yeah.
So but this one's in there. So I'm just calling it Alpha and Omega because there is plainly an Alpha and Omega in the sarcophagus, which is like the central place in if there's a single central place in the Great Pyramid, it's that empty sarcophagus in the King's Chamber, and there's an Alpha and Omega on that. So that's why I'm calling this an Alpha and Omega. What's the significance? Well, this again is one of the things that I haven't revealed, that I said I'm sitting on because I'm still going over. I'll give you an example, like just one picture, okay, right here. Now, I'm not going to show this too long, but you can see what I did there. I put a ruler over that so I can measure it. So I want to find out what angle that is. I want to find out all the things I find out about this revelation that's there. And so, until I do that, because here's an example. Here is the looking up from this mark. This is the original entrance to the Great Pyramid.
Oh,
the Egyptian governments had it closed, locked off. This is me on the inside in a place you can't get with a public entrance, looking to the outside.
Cool.
That outside is where the big chevrons are. That's the 19th course. That's the entrance on the outside of the Great Pyramid.
Wow.
So, here's an example of where it is right there. Okay. So,
wow, that's really cool.
Yeah. So, the question, somebody posted, made a comment on today's post, and they said, well, that's plainly a Templar, done by the Templars. So it's going to be the 13th century. And I think if you do, get your micrometer in there, get your tools in there, you'll find that were steel. He's saying, that was engraved with steel because obviously in the 13th century, let's see, did they have steel? I guess you could make the point they had started to use it there. So he was saying, but what I said to him in response to the comments is, people say that as if that's going to solve the problems of how you tool, the granite that's there. Yeah. Even if you have steel, it's no simple process. And by the way, The copper that the Egyptians had was laced with arsenic. It's as hard as steel, just about. You can do
Oh,
with that copper, you can do. So all this stuff about, first of all, you don't solve any problems by saying, they didn't have steel, because it's hard to do even with steel. It's hard to do with
interesting.
arsenic hardened copper. So it takes skill. It takes skill. And if you've been, you're the great grandson of a family that's been doing it for 1,000 years, you have a little bit of
Right,
knowledge that the
right.
person, just like if I asked you, Calvin, make me an iPhone. How quick are you going to do that for me? Guess what? Not everyone has to be an expert in an iPhone for us to have the iPhone. Not
Yeah,
everyone has to be an expert in tooling stone for us to get the Great Pyramid. So,
definitely. Okay.
they were talented artisans. Same thing with the boat building. You look at the boats that were built in the fourth dynasty, tremendous. There's no cookie cutter, buy 2x4s from Home Depot. They're all the same size. They took different size wood and they put it together like a jigsaw puzzle. Incredible artisanship
Definitely.
that seems to have been lost. It seems like the older you go, in the technology of ancient Egypt, the more precise it is. That newer almost means, more shoddy.
Yeah, definitely. Wow, that's really interesting. I applaud you for not necessarily putting anything out, saying anything unless you have all the evidence saying, I have this to prove it. I applaud you for not just throwing your stuff out there without doing your fair share of research on it. So
Yeah,
I'm
I
really
do.
excited to see.
I just have to spend time with it. I don't even know that I'll come up with anything more profound. I don't know. I just
Sure.
know that it's an incredible discovery. As a matter of fact, Robert Grant said that the day I posted it. He said, "Great picture, Larry. This is plainly an important discovery."
Yeah.
And so I think it
No matter
is, even
what.
if it was done by the Templars. What was their point? I mean,
Yeah.
but you can't, just like people say, well, the Alpha and Omega that Robert Grant found up in the sarcophagus, well, that could have been put there by later people. Yes, it could have been, but then he's done all these measurements on it to show that some of the major constants, Euler, phi, pi, are in that engraving. And so in that relief, whatever you want to call it, plainly a tremendous amount of intelligence went into it.
Definitely.
He thinks it is original with the builders because Alpha and Omega are older than Greek letters. I mean, Alpha was
Yeah.
around, in very many languages as a symbol, as was Omega. So the same thing could be said. That sign, because there is a Templar cross. I don't know if you saw it or not, but in that Alpha and Omega up at the top, there's a Templar cross. The Templar cross is older than the Templars. I mean, sorry, you can find.
It
I
is.
saw it. I saw that inscription in ancient Egypt, among hieroglyphs. So yeah, so
Very.
yeah, maybe it is a Templar cross, and maybe that Alpha and Omega up in the King's Chamber came later, but maybe it didn't. And don't tell me because you don't.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's the thing that drives me crazy is when a lot of these people they don't know for sure yet they say they know, and it's like, come on, guys, you got to have evidence to back up your claims. Kind of where I stand.
Because the thing is, that I've seen this so often in studying ancient Egypt. They were so practical. They were great craftsmen, but look at the way, for instance, and now look at how conservative the culture is. In America, we got Cubism, we got Expressionism, we got Romanticism. It changes every 50 years. This stuff. For thousands of years, Egypt kept the same art forms, the same architecture, the same principles of religion. It's like
Yeah,
unheard of. I don't think you'd find any other, civilization that kept such similar. And so they and their measuring system, measuring with a royal cubit and stuff.
it's
And
amazing.
so they would want to preserve their knowledge and find different ways to do it. So but it's just always the same. So it's a very conservative, and so when the scribes who were taught, that was a specialized skill. They were taught just like, boat builders and just like stone builders, they were taught their trade. And you'll see that they never start running out of space. Like, okay, oh, I can't fit it in. It's always neatly carved.
Yeah.
So they just make a decision. And they might write from right to left or left to right. They might, fit it down this way. But so their individuality came out. They still use the same symbols that were used for 4,000 years, or 3,000 anyway. They still, had this conservative culture and language, the hieroglyphics that were passed down, but they were able to express their creativity, their artisanship in the way that they placed those. And
Wow.
so, you know, that kind of skill, I mean, is the kind of thing that I see in this carving, you know,
Wow.
that's on the wall there, and it's singular. It's not. There are some places in the Great Pyramid where there's a lot of graffiti. You know, the Egyptian government has kind of, you know, wiped some of it off and stuff.
Yeah,
But the
yeah.
place where I found that Alpha and Omega, there's nothing. It's the only mark anywhere near it. So it's a very singular, and it's right near.
Yeah.
It's not too far from the scored line. So if you've studied the Great Pyramid, well, the scored line is a famous part of the entrance passage, the original part of the descending passage, and it's right near there. So that's a very singular mark in the Great Pyramid that all the early pyramid writers said was part of the original construction, those scored lines. And that Alpha and Omega I showed you is right near those scored lines. So it just,
Yeah.
that's an indication that it is original. Okay, the Templar cross, that's an indication. It could be 13th century, whatever. But the fact of where it's placed and how it's drawn is also evidence it could be older. So don't tell me you know, because you don't know, and I don't know. But you know, it is a remarkable piece of artisanship, whatever it
Absolutely.
is.
Yeah. That's really incredible. I mean, it gave me chills when you showed me that picture. That was a really compelling picture. It's really almost out of place sitting there. It is
Yeah,
really
it's
interesting.
stunning. It's stunning. It
Yeah.
is.
It's very crazy.
Uh, I did. I think I posted. I think I posted when I can't remember if I did or not. When Raven was one of my tourists who was with me, and when she saw it, she you can just hear the sigh from her. It's like it was almost like, you know, she had, you know, was like high or something. It was like a
Yeah. Wow. I can
wow.
only imagine. Wow, that's so incredible. I'm really interested to look more into that a little bit. I have also I watched you know, I've been watching a lot of your YouTube videos on the AIP channel over the past week or so, and I've noticed you kind of bring up a couple times that your posts on Instagram seem to keep disappearing. They keep being
Well,
deleted.
I mean, one of the times that happened, because, you know, I know that sometimes they, you know, they will take a post down because it's offensive or it's, you know, it's touching a subject that's, you know, racial or something, you know.
Yeah.
But they usually, I think they tell you when they do that, we have taken
Right.
down this post because it breaks
Yep.
community guidelines. Okay. I, so I did part of my Orion correlation theory was I wanted to calculate where Sirius came down, because Sirius is holy, you know, in Egyptian theology, astronomy, you know, and agriculture, because it was when it rose for the first time after being gone, because it's, you know, Sirius is not like the North Star, always visible in the heavens. It's gone for a period of days, and when it re-arises, that's always been associated with the flooding of the Nile and the time to, you know, have your crops ready and whatnot, or at least help you with the planting season. And so for very many reasons, Sirius was very important. Plus, I think you could go into the meaning of Sirius and the mythology behind it, but that's, so anyways, even though it's not part of Orion, it's not too far from Orion. I thought, I want to find where it would come on Egyptian soil based on the Orion. And so
Absolutely.
when I chased down to where it was like unbelievable. Okay, the uh, southern air shaft out of the King's Chamber points directly to no, from the Queen's, excuse me, it's the southern air shaft in the Queen's Chamber, points directly to Sirius.
Yeah, I saw that
Okay,
actually. That's
and it's at a 39-degree angle, and and this configuration I found where Sirius was, there's this temple over here, sort of like the Queen's Chamber. There's
right.
a street that's at a 39-degree angle, and it goes to this circular garden, and that's exactly where Sirius came down. So it's exactly on a 39-degree street going to like a King's Chamber, which is
Wow.
a mosque. And it was like, holy cow. And so I posted that on Instagram, and
Mhm.
somebody came back to me on a comment and said, "Aren't you afraid?" And I said, "Afraid of what?"
Hmm.
And they said, the watchers of those sites. So plainly, this person felt that there was some kind of sinister power associated with me finding such an incredibly esoteric, truth.
Yeah. Hmm.
So when I went looking for that video, which I plainly put in that comment I just told you was on there, it wasn't there. It wasn't on Instagram. It was simply
Wow.
gone. It's just gone. It was gone. No, you
So
broke
weird.
community guidelines, because how do they break community guidelines? It's not, it's, it's a
Yeah.
star. They didn't say anything
Education.
about racial, anything,
Yeah.
So that was plain. It was, aren't you afraid? I'm going back to what they said. Aren't you afraid of
Yeah.
them? And I said, no, I'm not afraid of anything, because I believe the
Wow.
Alpha and Omega guides me and protects me, and I'm not afraid of anything. But whoa, like what
Yeah.
happened? So I kind of I did a more recent video where I talk about that.
Yeah. Yeah. That's one that I watched.
That
And I was
was
like,
just
whoa.
freaking. I still don't have an explanation. I still, people weighed in when I said this, just like I'm saying to you. And if somebody makes some comments in your podcast, they'll act like they know. You don't know
Yeah.
unless you work for Instagram and you can tell me. But maybe even if you work for
Right.
Instagram, you don't know, because they found a way to, unbeknownst to you, sneak it out of there. I don't know how they did. I have no
Exactly.
idea. I have no idea what happened. Which one of you can say that you put up an Instagram post that was taken down and just eliminated without you being told? I don't know of anybody else that it's happened to. I suppose
Yeah.
there could
Me
be.
too.
That was just flipping weird.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that's never happened any other time, or has that happened to any of your YouTube videos or anything?
No, not that I know of. Yeah, that's the only time I'm really aware of that it happened. Yeah.
Wow, that's really weird. It's like, why would, I mean, it's not like, I
Yeah.
mean, it's educational, it's educational what you're sharing. So I mean, why would
And
they
I
have
have
a
no, like,
reason?
who did it? Like, how did it happen?
Yeah.
I
Wow.
didn't go to try and ask Instagram. I figured it'd be so hard to try and get to the bottom of that.
Yeah. I mean,
I don't want to spend the hours it would take. If somebody else, has the time and the inclination, or if you work for Instagram and you got the inside
yeah,
skinny, let us know. But I just leave it
right.
as mysterious. I can't explain.
So did you just repost it and call it good? And is it,
Well, I didn't repost it. I couldn't
okay.
repost it. I did. Well, let's see. Because I don't think it was a movie. It was several pictures in
Oh,
which I
okay.
explained. So when I redid it, so to speak, I did it as a video or
Yeah.
whatever,
Yeah.
because it wasn't on YouTube, because I don't put on YouTube, because just like a lot of people on Instagram, I don't always do videos. Sometimes I do pictures.
Sure.
Like today I
Yeah.
did a picture of, the Alpha and the Omega. And so that's what I did back when I did that. So that was simply gone. So there was no video I could go back to. Well, where's the video I used to upload? Well, there was no video. So I
Yeah.
just, so that the post was just plainly gone. And so we can't, because I'd like to look again at who it was, because, just follow which Instagram personality, I don't remember now, said to
Mhm.
me, aren't you worried? Like, who said that?
Yeah.
I don't know. I
Right.
can't
That's
remember, but
scary.
and
Like,
I can't find it now because that post is gone. So I can't see who said it to me.
oh man, that's cryptic, a little creepy.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, the thing is, part of the, doing what I do, there are big forces involved. You're talking about, I'm into my Instagram says that I like to uncover secrets. I like to explain symbols. I
yeah,
like to demystify mysteries. Well, you get involved in this stuff, and there's powers. There's good and evil powers. There's, you're getting
yeah,
into. Usually, mysteries are enshrouded in things like that. So, that's part of the territory, but
yeah.
uh,
Have,
still
have
unexplained.
have you at any point been labeled as like a pseudoscientist or sharing
Oh,
pseudoscientific?
sure.
Yeah,
Oh, yeah, I'm sure I have. Yeah, that I have no problem with that. Fine, I am. So what?
yeah. I mean,
Because
all in all, if
I go by the old saying that the theology is the queen of the sciences. Well, you're a pseudoscientist if you say theology's got anything to do with science. Well, guess what? I'm a pseudoscientist then, because I'm saying theology is the queen of the sciences, because it really is. It really is. In other words, if you could say that God is a trinity, or God is six parts, or God can control rain, anything like that. If it's true, it's science. It's just that the forensic science we've developed today, you know, wouldn't have the tools to measure that. So if we can't measure it, it's not true. Well, I'm not limiting myself to that, because
yeah,
to me, in the book, if you read my book, you'll see how I feel the Alpha and Omega guided me. I make that part of the narrative. That would never, get published by a scientific publisher.
right.
But I don't care. I don't want to be limited to forensic scientists. I'm not against forensic scientists. I think science. I think we need it. You know,
Yeah.
I don't want to get in a car that doesn't worry about what, you know, what the brake lining, you know, specifications are. You know, I want
Right.
the steering column to work right. I believe in science. I'm not against it. I just think that you can't explain everything with forensic evidence.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I'm definitely going to pick up your book because now I'm really interested in it. So like as soon as we get off this call, I'm going to have to order it, but I'm going to have to binge read it. But so like, if I, like me, myself, if I'm an atheist, if I'm being honest. And so I feel like a lot of people who are like looking at work of like yours, you immediately, you know, you put theology with science, and immediately other atheists, some like myself, would just be like, oh, you know, he's, you know, mentioning God, you know, it's not real science. But, you know, me, myself, even as an atheist, I don't necessarily believe in any God or gods. I'm still, if you have evidence, I mean, that's evidence, period. No matter what I believe, because I mean, fact is fact, no matter if you believe it or not. So,
Well, you know, the thing is, who was it? Who was it that coined the term synchronicity? We used to say coincidence. Was it Carl Jung or somebody? You know, the synchronicity was a term that they came up with. But I call, you know, what the old the Pilgrim Fathers would have called it is a providence of God. So whether you call it a synchronicity, a providence of God, a coincidence, it doesn't matter what you call it. It is something that asks for explanation beyond the just destiny or fate. When two things
right.
happen at the same time, that's a coincidence, that's a
Mhm.
synchronicity, that's a providence. You can interpret that any way you want to. If you cast it off as nothing, well, that's an interpretation that you can't prove either. If you want to take the stand, well, those are all just coincidences. Well, so what? If it's a coincidence, that's two things. That the very word itself, coincidence, means it's two things coming together at the same time.
Right,
So if you
right.
want to explain, if you want to explain coincidence by saying it's simply causal fate, fine. But you can also explain it by saying God wanted that to happen. So that, and that tends to be the way I explain it. That, you know, that the forces of nature and God's power worked it out that at this moment those two things were meant to come together. Because that's one of the ways I've been guided in my life, even from the time that I was I won't say I was an atheist, I was an agnostic, but
Mhm.
from the time I was an agnostic until now, I believed in guiding forces. You know,
Yeah.
because I could see them happening in my life. As a matter of fact, you know, I was being led by numbers. It's a long story, but you know, I'd see a license plate in front of me. It was playing. Oh my gosh! I just was thinking about that number. Look, it's right in front of me.
Mhm.
So it got to the point where I just said, you know, shouted out to God, the Almighty. I said, This is crazy. I'm going crazy. I am not going to go by numbers anymore. And I just felt the voice came back and said, you cannot choose how I communicate to you. And
Wow.
it's continued to happen. So in other words, numbers, you listen to what the things that Robert Grant says about numbers. You know, Robert Grant has this new book out, which is a completely new way of looking at the universe. It's the
Okay.
geometric unification of science and art. He
Okay.
really shows, it's unbelievable to me. It's unbelievably undeniable that all of creation is built on triangles, that waves, transverse waves, are built on triangles, circles are built on triangles, the universe is built on triangles. It's sort of like the proton, neutron, and electron. And he shows this mathematically. So mathematics, you know, numbers have personalities. They do. You can't change that. You might not like it. You can say it's not true, but it's true. Built into the number. A number has a personality and a character. So numbers are real, meaningful sources of symbolic truth.
So what do you
They
mean
carry.
by, if you don't mind, like what do you mean by that they have personality? Like a number has personality, exactly. If you're able to explain.
I wish we could, zoom in to Robert Grant, because you know that's his area
Gotcha, gotcha. So that's
he's
another one I'll have to
fast.
read then.
You know, math comes slowly for me, but I've seen it.
Okay.
One of the marginal readings, one of the names of God, Daniel 8:13, is Pelmoni, which translated means the wonderful numberer, or the
Hmm.
numberer of secrets. So that's one of the names of God that's listed in the Bible. So you know, you can, and I just think that that's one of the reasons, you know, the very hairs on your head are numbered. Things are done by number. Numbers have meaning, you know, it's,
Oh, okay.
yeah.
I get what you're saying. Okay.
I mean,
I would love to have you on again sometime
yeah,
just to talk about theology, because like I
well,
love talking about
there was
religion.
named, Jonathan Kistler that wrote a book, The Arithmetic of God. I did a Google search recently, and it seems like it's out of print, but I think you can still find it a few places electronically. It's called The Arithmetic of God by Don Kistler. And so he just goes through and says what the meanings of all the numbers are. And I just memorized it because I wanted, just for future things. So like 17 is victory, 18 is bondage, 19 is faith, 20 is redemption, 21 is this sinfulness, 22 is light, 23 is death, 24 is priesthood, 25, so every number's got a
Wow.
meaning.
Okay.
And of course people get into, angel numbers and numerology and all kinds of things. So I just think there's something to that. You got
Yeah.
to be careful. Because in that video I posted yesterday, I think it was, I talked about how a lot of esoteric people get lost in symbols. So you see
Mhm.
one symbol and it interprets a number symbol, and pretty soon you're in this circle of symbols. So if you can't break out of symbols, you're lost. That's dementia. If
Right.
you're just lost in the world of symbols, and I think a lot of people, I honestly do, I honestly do think a lot of esoteric people are lost in a jungle of symbols. The symbols have to point to something outside themselves, or they're not really a symbol. Because
Mhm.
if symbols just point to symbols, you're on a dead end track.
Yeah.
You're
Agreed.
in a loop.
I
That's a form of dementia. So I'm just saying, if symbols mean anything, they mean something, and there's no point. You have no point dealing with symbols if you're not ultimately going to try and figure out what they mean.
Right.
Because
Right.
that's one thing I've been involved in all my life. Just trying to, you know, uh, like one of my friends said from high school when I met him years later at a wedding, he said, "Larry, you were always searching for the meaning of things, and I can see you think you found something." And that's just true. And when he said
Yeah.
that to me, he was voted most likely to succeed in our high school class. So to hear from this guy that he's
Yeah.
seeing in me a change, like you were searching, now I think you feel like you found something. That's
Amazing.
exactly true. I do. There's no reason to search if you don't think you can find it. I remember when I was a young man, I put a sign on the side of my Jeep, Alaska or bust. I was going to go to Alaska in search of my soul. Something that everybody should do, but nobody does. So like Siddhartha, I set off with a sign on the side of my Jeep, Alaska or bust. And
Interesting.
I knew, because I had a college education at that point, I knew that the philosophers said you can search for the meaning of life, but you'll never find it. But I thought that's stupid. That's stupid. I instinctively believe that life has meaning, and if why search for it if you can't find it? That would be stupid. But I didn't go by that. I feel like I was enlightened, that my search hit pay dirt. And so when my friend, the most likely to succeed, said, "I can see you found something," I felt like, well, there's an outside affirmation.
Yeah. That's amazing. And I mean,
But
I think so too. I think you're really on to something powerful that could shift everything as we know it. I think so. I'm really interested to see how your research advances and how other people start to accept your research. And maybe in a couple of years we'll start to see stuff like that in history books, which would be really cool. Because I don't think like a modern history book, you don't see this kind of stuff like what you're doing in like a school textbook. Am I
yeah,
correct?
people say that all the time about Robert Grant stuff too, because he shows, when you see that geometry is meaningful instead of just you got to memorize all this stuff, and you see this, the flower of life, you see sacred geometry, you see the way things fit. And so a lot of people have remarked, gee, I wish I would have learned this, when I was in school. But I think the same thing about, what you're saying about me and this being taught in school, because I taught school for a number of years and I was a
Mhm.
pretty popular teacher and stuff, but I don't have any illusions about cracking the educational establishment. It's a very conservative institution, and it's not
Yeah,
open to new ideas anytime
definitely.
soon. Just like me thinking about Robert Bauval, why are you trying to get the notice and the attention of the world's big shots? The National Geographics,
Mhm.
the Harvard universities. Like, just you've got something. Yeah, I'm not holding my breath that I'm going to make any major changes in the way the world is. I think that, it says in the Proverbs, if you're wise for yourself. And
Right.
so, individually, if you come to a truth, that's the way it happens. And if by chance a group of 1,000 people or a whole school district or a whole country or a whole discipline is affected, hey, babe.
Hi. Or is that okay?
Well,
How are
yeah.
you?
That's okay. No, it's fine.
Hi.
We're about,
I
this is my wife, Lynn. Hey, so we're about winding down anyway here, aren't we, Calvin?
yeah,
So,
yeah, yeah. I just we'll kind of we'll kind of leave it at that. I just wanted to ask, So you're a poet, am I correct? You write some poetry?
I do. Yeah, I do put
He's
things
an
to verse
awesome
sometimes.
poet. He's an
Yeah, because I
absolute
mean that's the thing is I watched some of your YouTube videos and I've seen you do some of your poetry, and I wanted to ask, do you have a poem that you could maybe read for me and for the audience right now?
Well, okay, since I wrote this one today, I'll just read this. This was to Robert Grant.
Sure.
And for those of you
Absolutely.
who don't know Robert Grant, just look at his Robert Edward Grant, at Robert Edward Grant on Instagram. He's an accomplished, he knows like 8 languages, he's an accomplished musician, accomplished artist. He's a polymath. So and I think he's like an amalgam, and I mean this without hyperbole. So sorry if you think this is too hyperbolized, but I think he's an amalgam of Leonardo da Vinci and Albert Einstein. So
Amazing.
he's in that world of, atomic physicists that are brilliant. So here's the poem I wrote today. It's his birthday today.
All right.
The table was set for 24 or 26 or one more. Aristotle and Plato acted as host. Socrates would give the toast. Handel was late, but Bach on time. Wagner conducted, but who would rhyme? Euclid cube Pythagoras tie, which Toth unknotted with 3D pi. Francis said mass, which Albert mixed with holy C squared, draining sticks. Newton applauded, but Feynman was bored. Galileo got planked and Tesla ignored. A conundrum proposed by Fermi and Born puzzled all, even Maxwell forlorn. What pattern to seat this illustrious crowd? The winner cloaked with fine structure shroud. Heisenberg stumped, so Hawking, Dirac, joining Hermes and Mercury with panic attack. With all at wit's end, who appears on the stage? Robert Edward Grant, the Instagram sage. Start with a spot from which 2 lines shoot, he says with a tone joining cubit, meter, and foot. Have 26, 24, 10 right angle joints. Seat each by unit except the 3 points. Then all 27 each find a home. Product sum, a laconic tome. So Robert awarded the robe as prize. Eno Neo 1, no surprise. So you'd have to see that written to catch a lot of the allusions and the hidden messages that are there. But
That was great.
yeah, so I
really
just
liked that.
and I always rhyme, so I'm incapable of free verse. I always feel like there has to be rules, there has to be
Right,
order. And
right.
if I'm writing free verse, I figure there's no rules, I can't do it. So I always make it rhyme.
Yeah,
Just
I'm a
gets it.
musician myself, and so I write my own lyrics and stuff. So I'm the same way. I try to make my words rhyme because I think it feels weird when I'm writing music and it doesn't rhyme. It's weird to me.
Yeah, if it doesn't rhyme, you got to be subject yourself to some other kind of discipline,
Exactly.
at least in my opinion. But that's
Yeah.
my conservative limitation, I guess. So
Absolutely. All right. Well, Larry, that was an amazing talk. I really had an awesome time, and I think I learned a lot from you. I'm going to pick up your book. I'm going to pick up some of your friends' books that you showed, and I'm going to look a little bit more into some of the things that you mentioned. And I'm really excited to look more into it and to see what other things you have to show the audience. And I mean, is there anything you wanted to tell the audience before you go? Anything you wanted to plug or anything
well,
like
just
that?
if you're we just had a successful tour to Egypt. It's Egypt is safe. We had to be test negative for COVID to get into the country and to come back to the U.S. and we take care of all that on the tour. And then so if you really got it on your bucket list, especially now with masks being lifted in a lot of places and stuff, by October. It looks like the Grand Egyptian Museum should be open. It'll be a historic first to be there and see that. And so I've got an expedition planned called the Mysteries of Egypt in October. And, save up your money and come on that. I'm a lot more inexpensive than a lot of these big shots. And it will include a 2-hour private entrance into the Great Pyramid. So if you want to go to places that you can only go through special permission, in the Great Pyramid, then plan to come on our tour.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to start saving my pennies then, because I tell you what, I mean, being able to venture around the pyramid with someone as educated as you would be a dream of mine. But again, Larry, I really appreciate you coming on, and I definitely would like to have you on again sometime, because I would really like to talk a little bit about your theology and a little bit like that, because I just love to talk about religion. So maybe sometime we can get in contact and maybe have another discussion about something like that. Because I just
sure, but and I'm glad to do it. But I just want to say, everything I said today was my religion too. In other words, you saying you're an atheist, that's your religion. So everybody's spouting their own religion all the time. But I'm glad to talk about theology. That's fine. Whatever you want to talk about.
Absolutely.
It's all this. I mean, really, you know, because the way I ended that poem, when Eno, Neo, and one, Robert Grant up and takes those three letters and changes the order. So instead of one, O-N-E, you can have Neo, and then he also does something with Eno, like Enoch,
Oh,
enough,
okay.
whatever. And so all is one. So that's a thing that a lot of alternative groups are into, you know, and that's the kind of thing they say where it's not taught in schools. Well, you know, Robert Grant is one that's working hard to show, you know, a unified field theory, to show that everything is one.
Yeah.
And so when I'm saying that everything I said is theology, well, it's also, you know, history, it's also my beliefs, it's also archaeology, it's all those things, because if you're really working on truth, it's one, you know, it's
Awesome.
one. So everything is everything, you know, it's
Definitely. All right. Well,
yeah.
I guess I won't hold you up for too much longer today, Mr. Pahl. I really appreciate you talking to me, and I hope to stay in touch with you and learn more about you in the future. But thank you again for
Okay,
coming on,
thanks for
Larry.
having me, Calvin. Okay, bye-bye.
Absolutely. Bye-bye.